You're listening to Catchy English, the podcast that sticks.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Everyday English Talks. I'm Emma. We're so excited to start this journey with you. In this podcast, we'll talk about common English learning problems, share tips, and give you a chance to listen to real conversations at your level. You can even play this podcast while you sleep, kind of like ASMR for English learners, or use it as listening practice during your daily routine.
And I'm Jack. Thanks for tuning in today. Each episode is a chance to practice your listening skills, improve your vocabulary, and most importantly, know that you're not alone in your English journey. If you have a topic you want us to talk about, leave a comment and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Today's topic is something we hear all the time from English learners. I understand English, but I can't speak it. So, get comfy, grab a cup of tea, and let's get started. Here's something that blows my mind. Our brains actually use completely different neural pathways for understanding versus speaking a language. It's like having a superhighway for comprehension, but a dirt road for production.
That's fascinating. And it explains so much about why I could understand every word of Japanese anime, but couldn't order lunch in Tokyo.
Well, the science behind this is pretty incredible. Studies show that passive language processing uses primarily the temporal lobe, while speaking engages multiple brain regions simultaneously, including areas for motor control, emotional regulation, and executive function.
So it's almost like trying to coordinate an entire orchestra instead of just listening to the music?
Exactly right. And here's where it gets really interesting. Research from MIT shows that even mild stress can reduce our language access by up to 30%. So when we're nervous about speaking, we're literally making it harder for our brains to perform.
That explains why so many people freeze up in real conversations, even when they've practiced extensively at home.
And you know what's particularly fascinating? Studies have found that successful language learners often have lower levels of perfectionism. They're willing to make mistakes and keep going.
Hmm, that's counterintuitive. You'd think being more precise would help you learn better.
Well, here's the thing. Recent research from the University of Michigan found that learners who focused on communication rather than perfect grammar actually ended up with better overall language skills in the long run.
That's really surprising. How does that work exactly?
It's all about neural plasticity. When we're focused on genuine communication, our brains naturally start to notice and internalize language patterns. It's similar to how children learn. They don't study grammar rules, they just try to get their point across.
Speaking of children, I've always wondered why they seem to pick up spoken language so much more easily than adults.
Well, that's another area where the research challenges our assumptions. While children do have some advantages in neural plasticity, adults actually have several benefits: better analytical skills, more developed memory strategies, and a deeper understanding of how language works.
That's actually really encouraging to hear. So, what are some evidence based strategies that adult learners can use to bridge this understanding speaking gap?
One fascinating technique that's gained a lot of attention is called private speech, essentially talking to yourself in the target language while doing everyday tasks. Studies show it helps create stronger neural connections because you're combining language with physical actions.
Oh, wow. So, all those times I've been muttering to myself in Spanish while cooking weren't just me being weird?
Not at all. And there's this technique called backward building that's shown remarkable results. You start with the last word of a sentence and gradually add words backward until you can say the whole thing fluently.
That's such an interesting approach, like building muscle memory for phrases instead of individual words.
Exactly. And speaking of muscle memory, research shows that using gestures while speaking a new language can improve fluency by up to 40%. It's like your body helps your brain access the language.
You know, that reminds me of how actors use movement to remember their lines better.
And here's something really cool from recent neurolinguistic studies. Multilingual people often access different aspects of their personality when speaking different languages. It's like each language gives them a slightly different voice.
That's incredible. So, learning to speak isn't just about communication, it's about developing new facets of yourself?
Precisely. And studies show that this psychological flexibility can lead to improved cognitive function and even delayed onset of dementia by up to 4 to 5 years.
Well, that certainly puts a different spin on the frustration of language learning. It's actually rewiring our brains for the better.
And you know what's really encouraging? Research indicates that it's never too late to start. A study of adults learning a new language showed significant brain changes after just 3 months of consistent practice.
That's so motivating, especially for people who think they've missed their window for language learning.
Let's wrap this up with one final thought. The gap between understanding and speaking isn't a flaw in our learning process. It's actually a natural stage that every language learner goes through. The key is to embrace it and keep moving forward.
That's such a powerful perspective. It takes the pressure off and turns it into part of the journey rather than an obstacle to overcome.
And remember, every fluent speaker started exactly where you are now. They just kept talking, kept trying, and kept believing in their ability to progress. That's really all it takes: persistence and patience with yourself. That's it for today's episode. We hope you feel encouraged.
If you understand English, you're already halfway there. Speaking is the next step, and you can do it. We believe in you.
Thanks for joining us on Everyday English Talks. We'll see you next.